All right, time for some quick notes for Chapter 3 on our gold paper here. And just a reminder, this is to say, what have you learned in Chapter 3? What should you remember? And what's important to study for the test so you're familiar with the vocab, familiar with the concepts. All right, so back in 3.1, we had all kinds of vocab, okay? So just running through a few of these parallel lines, okay? Lines that are never going to meet, right, on the same plane. A picture's probably good enough. Perpendicular lines, lines that meet, and when they meet, they're at exactly a right angle, right? With both parallel and perpendicular, never ever assume they're parallel or perpendicular. Look for the markings, so either this little right angle or maybe arrows on our lines, right, for parallel. Okay, skew lines, only on a three-dimensional object. So let me first draw a three-dimensional object, right? Try anyways. And we'll put some, these are the hardest ones, I guess, to draw, the invisible lines in the back, right? All right, going back to my blue here, skew line. These are from different planes, right? They cannot be on parallel planes. I'm sorry, they could be on parallel planes, but they're not on the same plane and they're going in different directions. So something like this front line here with this side line here. They're at different levels, they're on different planes, they're never going to touch. Those are skew lines. It only happens on a three-dimensional object. Okay. Then we had all these angles we talked about, corresponding angles. So we have two lines in a plane, transversal cuts through. It creates these, maybe the top right and the top right, when those four angles are formed by the transversal, okay? Alternate interior angles. Once again, I have two lines in my plane. A line goes through. Alternate interiors are inside, between the two lines, right? They have to stay in between here. They can't be on the outside. And one's going to be on the top, on the left, and one's on the bottom right. So opposite sides and opposite ends of the transversal. Alternate exteriors, and we'll keep them red. So once again, I have these lines. I have a transversal that comes through it. Alternate exteriors, those have to be on the outside, right? Make sure they come from the outside. So if I have bottom left here, I have top right here, okay? So opposite ends and opposite sides of the transversal. And finally, my last one, my consecutive interior angles, I have two lines. I have a transversal that cuts through them. And these are inside. That's what the interior means, right? They're inside between here. But because they're consecutive, they're on the same side of the transversal, okay? Now, I want to make a point. If you look at those four pictures I just drew, I purposely did not make those lines parallel anywhere in there, because this vocab goes to a relationship of angles, and that's it. There's no numbers attached to those relationships, okay? Because those are locations. That vocab belongs to location, okay? Now, when we switch into 3.2 and 3.3 notes, okay? Now we add this if the lines are parallel, okay? If the lines are parallel, the corresponding angles will be congruent. Or in 3.3, we said if the corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are going to be parallel, okay? And once again, alternate interior angles. If the lines are parallel, then those angles are congruent. Or if the alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. And then alternate exterior angles. If the lines are parallel, the angles are congruent. Or if the angles are congruent, the lines will be parallel. So they work back and forth, right? But again, the vocab for what type of angles is simply a position, not a number. In the last set, the consecutive interiors, if there's parallel lines, they will be careful here, supplementary. They'll add up to 180. And if they're supplementary, then you have parallel lines. Okay, so quick reminder on 3.4 and 3.5. We did not do those sections. It was an algebra type of review, but if we talked about some of them, and I have no problem filling this in so you have this information, but you don't necessarily get graded on any of this on the test. Rise over run is slope, and we have the slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You have positive slopes, okay, that go up to the right. You have negative slopes that fall to the left. Zero slopes are super boring to ski on, but you can ski on them, they're horizontal. And undefined, never ever ski on this slope. It will probably end up in death, so please don't ski on that slope. And those are the ones that are vertical, okay? That is not important to what we're taking the test over, but you do need to have that. That should be algebra review. I did bring up, and we went over this, and we do need it for some of our problems. Parallel lines have same slopes, right? So if one's 2/3, the other one's 2/3. And perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So if one is 4/5, the other one is -5/4, right? They flip and they go opposite the sign, okay? That was important for what we did in 3.6. Backside, okay? Everything at the top is from 3.5, writing equations of lines. We didn't do that, so I'm not going to really talk about that much, but it's there. It's good to know. And if you ever need to do some writing equations of lines, go check the notes out. And we went into 3.6, which we did take notes on, and we have some new theorems there. If a transversal is perpendicular to one of two parallel lines, so here's my two parallel lines, transversal cuts through. If it's perpendicular to one, then it's also going to be perpendicular to the other. And on the flip, if two lines are perpendicular to the same line, they're both perpendicular, then that means that these two lines have to be parallel to each other. Okay. And then probably the toughest questions on 3.6 that we want to make sure we know how to do is finding the shortest distance between two lines. Remember, that's the perpendicular distance. Okay. And remember, we want two slopes, right? Two slopes. One is just the slope of the line, and one is the perpendicular slope. Then we want 2 points, one from the original line and one once we count the second line, right? And then between that, we find the distance using the distance formula that we learned in chapter 1, okay? Change those, subtract the x's and square it, subtract the y's and square it, add the two together, take the square root. I will tell you on a test or quiz whether to leave it as a simplified radical or as a decimal. Make sure you read the directions on it, and if I forget to tell you that, you get to leave it either way, whichever way you prefer. Good luck on your Chapter 3 review pack. Let me know if there's any questions.